Want a picture of Lockie? Right, love.
Maybe not what you said. Go around.
One of them things. Yeah, we did. We did indeed.
He graduated in like late 90s. What did he do? He's
Going the other way.
I have so much power.
Todo, miedo, abajo y balas.
You know you
Hello and welcome to our Fringe live stream today, which is about an introduction to bringing a show to the Fringe. I was going to say good morning, but for a lot of you it won't be morning, so welcome from wherever in the world you're joining us today. I can see in the comment section already we've got a really lovely international mix, very much like the Fringe itself, so please do keep engaged and let us know where you're from, because it's really useful for us. I guess first thing is we want to say hello. This is our team that are with us today. So we thought we'd introduce ourselves, and we're going to try and do that via the wonders of technology. I should probably put out my own name.
We're on.
Hi.
Hello.
So I guess I should start. Hi, my name's Alan. I'm the registration manager here at the Fringe Society. I'm in charge of the registration process, which kicks off in January, and I also have experience helping artists with the sort of media and marketing campaigns of the shows and for helping put these sessions together. Kevin?
Thanks, Alan. Hello, everyone. My name's Kevin. I'm the Venues and Companies Manager here at the Fringe Society, and I head up the team who's responsible for being the first point of contact for anyone who wants to bring a show to the Fringe or anyone who wants to run a Fringe venue.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm the Participant Development Officer, and I advise artists on their professional and creative development on when they're at the Fringe and beyond.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm the Digital Marketing Coordinator here at the Fringe Society, so I look after the Fringe's social media, email marketing and all of the tech behind the scenes today. So do let us know if you can't hear us or something goes wrong.
If anything's wrong, just immediately blame Daniel. It's fine.
Danielle!
I'll turn off the webcam and we can all relax.
I feel like a news anchor there. Great. So one of the things that makes these sessions really great is when people can really get involved and ask as many questions as you want. So Daniel is going to be looking through like our live stream to see any questions you make in the comments, and he will talk you through how to do that because he's better at that than I. And then I've been looking through some of the questions that people sent through when you know you're interested in coming to the event and tuning in. So between us, we're going to cover questions. Daniel, do you want to talk people through how best to engage with us today?
Sure, so it's already great to see so many of you tuning in from all over the world and letting us know where you're from. So as we go, just throw in any questions you have into the live chat. If you're on a desktop computer, that should appear in the top right hand corner of the screen. If you're on a mobile or tablet device, live chat is normally located below the video, but this can move around depending on what you're using. In order to leave a comment, you just need to log into YouTube using any Google or Gmail account, and it means your name pops up so we know who we're talking to. This stream is live, but you do have the ability to pause and rewind it. But we do recommend staying with us live so we can answer your questions as we go, because we may have answered it before you've asked it. And then finally, the Q&A live chat and this video will be available through the link you use to access the stream at any time in the future. So if there's something you missed, you can come back and look at it later. And as we go along, I'll also be throwing links in the live chat to different resources and pages on the Fringe website that we think are useful. And again, that live chat will be available for as long as this video is online.
Great, thank you, Daniel. So yeah, just to reiterate that, if you've got a question and it feels like we're ignoring it, we're not. We've got a handy document on our screen where Daniel is copying and pasting into different sections so as we answer it at the most appropriate time. So what are you going to gain from this, and what can we tell you as the Fringe in the future? Kevin, I'm going to throw to you on this one while I make magic things appear on the screen.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Alan. So yes, as we've been saying, this is very much an introduction. So we're calling these Fringe casts, and this is the first one of many in a series that will be going up online until about July. So we'll be working with you on your journey to the Fringe, giving you advice at the appropriate time along the way.
Stay with us, people.
Exactly. Many things that will be coming up. You'll see on the screen are subjects that these particular Fringe casts will follow, and that's specifically because some of your questions will be quite detailed and some questions won't be. So today is very much about an introduction of what to expect and what to think about now. and what to plan for. So giving you key dates and key things to think about and plan for in the future. Many of those, obviously, finding a venue is going to be a big one on everyone's list. So we'll cover that a little bit today. Certainly engaging with the media and reviewers, advertising and marketing your show is a huge one. And also setting a budget, which is something that I like to talk about because nobody else likes to talk about it. Because they think it's boring, but it's not, and it's really important. So make sure you do that. And also thinking about what you're going to do with your show after the Fringe. Do you want it to have a life after the Fringe? What are your aspirations? And that's very much what Katie will walk us through and talk about later today and also later on in this series of Fringe casts.
Thank you, Kevin. Great bit of PR there for budgeting. We're going to run home and do one now. I just want to say quickly before we get started with our first sort of section is loads of the questions that came through in advance are exactly the questions you should be asking now. They were all at a really good stage from the start. A lot of them were general, like, how do I do this? And you're in the right place. That's exactly what we're going to start answering. And also there was one that I really wanted to highlight that said, do you know what, I'm just looking for a bit of reassurance. And if there's anything that we can give today and then through your journey to August and beyond, hopefully it's that reassurance. And please know that if you ever needed that, that's when you drop an email to us, participants@edfringe.com. That's a direct link to Kevin and his team. So that's a really good place to start. So I'm going to come to you, Katie.
Yes.
So loads of the questions, well, not loads. So there was a couple of questions about, like, should I come to the Fringe? Like, it feels like there's a lot of competition. Like, what is it? How do I apply? Do I audition?
Yes.
So lots of people kind of wondering how the whole process works and starts. And I thought it would be a good thing for us to start is talking a bit about what the Fringe is.
Yeah, so when people talk about applying for the Fringe, that's not necessarily what the kind of narrative that we use is. You might apply for certain venues, and that's depending on the venue that you'd be approaching. But generally speaking, the Fringe is an open access festival. That means that anyone can perform on the Fringe once you can find a venue to host you. And if you can't find a venue to host you, you could set up your own venue, and Kevin would go through that with you at a different session. So the background to this is that the Fringe started in 1947, and that was when a new festival, the Edinburgh International Festival, was created to repair broken relationships across Europe after the Second World War. And it was to bring nations and people together in the spirit of cultural exchange and the arts. So that festival continues until this day. We're both 71 years, not me, but the festivals are both 71 years this year. And the Edinburgh International Festival was a curated festival, which means the shows included were invited to perform, and the festival was programmed with work of international appeal. But there were 8 UK-based companies who weren't invited, but felt their work was worthy of being included. So they came to Edinburgh anyway. They found their own venues to perform in, they sold their tickets, they printed their own posters, and they took to the streets, as many do today still, to flyer and market their shows. Now, essentially, that means that they were self-producing. They were doing everything themselves, from producing the show, casting it, rehearsing it, getting it to Edinburgh, finding their venues. But oftentimes these venues would be different, unusual spaces that you wouldn't usually, like a church, you wouldn't usually see performance in. So between 1947 and 1958, more and more shows continued to come to Edinburgh to perform and produce their shows on what was then known as the Fringe. See what I did there?
Seamless. I also love the way the little slide just ready.
Yes, thank you. So the Fringe of the International Festival. Now, at the time, there were around 120 shows taking place on the Fringe. They were all selling their own tickets and marketing their shows individually, and there was no infrastructure in place to help support the growing phenomenon of the Fringe. So there was no kind of guidance for audience, there was no support for the artists involved. They were all individually trying to get people into their shows. It was then in 1958 that the Fringe Society was formed in response to the growth to maintain, support and facilitate the festival, providing a centralised box office, programme directory and marketing the Fringe to Scotland, the UK and the world. So that's it. I mean, a lot of people come to Edinburgh still and self-produce, and they do everything themselves. They market their show, they get everything together. But the Fringe is there. The Fringe Society is there to support people in that. We provide the box office to this day, and we provide the centralised programme so that it makes it easier for everyone to navigate this.
And the basics of sort of how people bring a show to Edinburgh and the role of the Fringe Society hasn't at its core changed since 1958. It is exactly the same.
I find it fascinating how, like considering the amount the world has changed in that time, the amount the basic nature of like this is what the Fringe is.
Yeah.
Actually, it's the same as those 8 companies.
Yeah.
It's you know what? No, you don't have to wait for anyone to tell you can come. I mean, bar your venue, you should probably
Or
have
if
that
you set up your own venue,
Yeah.
then you can still do it by yourself. Yeah, it's that thing of, it's open to anyone. It's the biggest platform for creative expression in the world, and anyone can come here once they have a story to tell and a stage on which to tell it.
Yeah. So that question again, I'm going to go to you with this and Kevin, about sort of someone wondering about the scale and how they can possibly fathom their show in amongst it all. Can we talk a little bit about the scale and how that should sort of factor in your decision about whether or not you should be coming? I'm just putting up some stats on the screen now about the 2018 Fringe.
Yeah, definitely. So really, I think this came out yesterday when we did our session for another time zone. It's a lot about focusing what your goal is, focusing on what that might be. So a lot of people say they want everyone to see their show, and it'll be very unlikely that everyone will see your show. So you're going to have to think about what your audience is. If you've performed the show before, have you seen that audience in a certain place, in a certain kind of theatre? Who is your audience? If you don't know your audience, you should find out who that is. So basically narrowing down a lot of what your goals are going to be, probably 2 or 3 I think would be the maximum goal. So really start to think about asking yourself questions about why you're coming to the Fringe, which is the biggest one. We'll go into a little bit more depth of that later, but that's
the thing I kind of wanted to say on this one, because the person who worded the question, sorry I didn't get your name when it came through in advance, but it was like, oh, should I come? How could I possibly stand out amongst all of these shows? And what I would say is, genuinely, I did my first show back in 2011, and I think it has to be like just focus on you and exactly what Kevin said there, like why you're doing the Fringe. Because if you go in thinking how am I going to get noticed and win all the awards, you should have an idea of your marketing certainly, but what are your reasons for doing it?
Yeah, and it's not always about, getting the audience in. It can be about getting the right reviewer in, that then you can take that review forward to sell your show in the future. Or it might be the right producer or the right programmer that comes in and helps you to set up a tour. And actually a lot of people that I've spoken to said that they performed their very, very best Fringe show of their run when they had 3 people in the audience. It's not always about getting that sellout show, but it is finding the right place in which your show works and the right kind of audience that you're looking to target.
There's very few other times I think where you get the chance to see your work maybe 23 times in a row responding to a completely different international audience every day. Like it's a very unique experience. Great. I just want a little bit more just about us, just so as you fully have the idea of what we are as the Fringe Society and what we do. One of the things you'll hear us talk a lot about is the fact that we will not recommend. We're an impartial organisation, which I think is important to get people to understand at this point. Does anyone want to pick up on our impartiality?
Sure, absolutely. So essentially, in the same way that we would never recommend a show, we also don't recommend venues, any specific ones. What we try to do is give you advice on thinking about what it is you need from a venue and then identifying those which can provide you with that. So in the same way, we're impartial to shows. When it comes to the public, we are unable to promote every single one of those 3,000 plus shows you just saw earlier. So essentially what we do is we provide guidance, support and advice to anyone who wants to take part in the Fringe. So we don't direct the festival in any way, we just provide support, guidance and advice to everyone who wants to take part, and that's including shows, including venues, including media, including arts industry people like producers and promoters, and audiences as well. So we help everybody make the right decision. So when you look at our website, our ticketing website, you'll see lots of ways to filter different shows and different genres, and by country and by date and time, and all sorts of other ways of filtering shows out. So that's basically what the Fringe Society was put together to do back in 1958, and we're still doing that today. So again, it's to support, advise, and guide, not direct.
Yeah, and it's like something Alan said yesterday. We're like your parents. We love everyone equally, and we don't pick one over the others. So we never recommend one show or venue.
I may have described us as dysfunctional parents, and then I realised that loving all of your children the same is actually quite functional.
Yeah, pretty decent.
So we're lovely parents. Cool. If I can move us along then, I think the next one is where we might start to get to some of your questions, because then it's a natural place for some of them to come up. We're going to now talk you through the steps, and we've chosen to do it in the form of a timeline, really, of what you should be thinking about when. So, step one. I think we've kind of covered this, but do you want to reiterate step one, Kevin?
Yes, absolutely. Get in touch with us. You probably have, or you know how to, because you have found this in the world somehow. But you can always email us on participants@fringe.com. It's a brilliant email address, because me and my team sit behind that. We pride ourselves on being able to answer almost any question at all that comes our way. And that's a pretty bold and broad statement, but I think it's true. And we also know we know how to find the answer if we don't know the answer. So generally, if you do have a question, the best place to get an answer to that question is by emailing us directly. And I think Daniel might be popping that in the comments box as I speak. So really another one, if you want to pop up step 2 there, Alan, would be thinking about these big W5H questions, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Or if I want to enunciate properly, who, what, when, where, why, and into that microphone. So essentially, as I said earlier, you're going to be thinking about your goals and what you want to achieve out of coming to the Fringe. And the very first question you should ask yourself is why? Why are you coming here? Is it to showcase something that you think is a story that needs to be told that hasn't been told yet? Is it because you've got an established career and you want to broaden that out, or broaden your exposure out to a world level art market? And then think about the what as well. Like, what is it you're bringing? Is it something that's ready to be brought? Are you comfortable with it? Are you ready for the world to see it? Is it the best it can be? Think about when you'll be performing. Think about where you'll be performing, and the why, of course, is there. And how will you do it? So those are all the questions which I know are very big questions, but if you start thinking about those right now and very early on, it will influence every decision you make along the way and every decision you make while you're here. So if you can get an answer to these questions, that will be the framework for your goals. And then once you've got your goals, you've got all the questions answered, you don't have to worry about anything else, because it will fall into place, because you'll know exactly what direction you need to take. When you come up against something that you don't understand or don't need to make a decision on, you've already got that answered because you've thought about it ahead of time.
And do you know what I think? I always like to say on this point, it's so easy to, like, people hear that we say ask yourself these questions, and sometimes they seem so obvious that people like skip them and come back to them like, oh, I'll figure out why I'm doing this down the line. I just want to do it. Whereas actually, like, when it comes to like your marketing, when it comes to what of the arts market you want to engage with, almost at every stage, if you need to have answered these questions, and if you jump that, it's only going to come back to bite you, I think, later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as Kevin goes on to describe some more steps and we chat through everything else, you'll realise that all of the things that we talk through in this timeline do come back to those why are you here questions and who are you trying to engage with. So I do think that, don't plan your Fringe until you've answered these questions.
Totally. Which brings us to step 3.
Yes, my favourite. Show, let's talk about money. But really, it's a very important one. Just to give you some some of you maybe a reality check. The Fringe is not necessarily a place where people make money. And it's something that you need to be well aware of and plan for. And the only way you can do that is by finding out how much things cost, and make a budget. Sorry.
You just love the word.
I just like saying it more than I need to. It's one of the fundamental things that I think people struggle with the Fringe, and we fully acknowledge that. It is an arts market. You're not necessarily looking to sell out packed houses every night and take home a huge box office. What you're looking for is onward experience, onward opportunities for that show or for your performing company or for you as a performer, using the Fringe as a brilliant place to learn. And then, sorry, just to move on, we do have, I got a little bit lost there in the philosophy, I don't know why. I guess it was too much money. So what we've done is we've put together a budget tool, which is actually really useful. It's put together with all of the expenditure and income that you might make, so thinking about things where you might spend money and where you might make money, and we've done all the sums for you. So basically, you just
I'm just going to pop that in the comments now. So
perfect.
Yeah, because we actually had a question which I'm trying to see about like what would be the rough cost of like a 50-seater venue. So
there's a question from Donald saying, how much would it roughly cost to put on a play for 4 weeks in a smallish venue, about 50 seats?
Oh wow.
Well, anywhere from 0 to I would say probably about $3,000. But that's just a rough estimate. That's a guess. Because essentially there are too many idiosyncrasies involved in a show and a venue. So basically, where you're going to learn the answer to that question is by contacting venues, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But it's only by asking those questions. It depends what your show needs. It depends if it's technically complicated. It depends on where the venue is and the level of service that they're providing you. Are they giving you a box office? Are they giving you a technician? Are they giving you front of house? Are they going to help you with your marketing? Do they have a media office? All of these things are services on top of just getting a space that you have people come and go from.
And that budget tool we talked about, we've got some case studies.
That's in the budgeting section of the website.
And it's worth just clarifying on that point that we're impartial and we do not run the venues.
Yes.
That's why that cost, it can be between 0 and say 3,000. That is sorry.
It's early.
That is so your cost for the venue. We're not directly involved with that. The only aspect where we come in is with the registration. You pay for that. So just answering that question specifically, if they're doing 4 weeks, Alan, that's the full Fringe.
Yeah, which actually, spoiler for point 5, I will talk you through.
I thought it was 4. I came in too soon.
4 is we're circling point 4 as we speak, and it's choosing a venue. I feel like we're naturally sliding into that realm.
Excellent.
Like
I'm happy to slide into any realm. It's totally fine. When choosing a venue, what you're looking for is essentially, I'll give you 3 criteria to think about. And that is audience capacity, which I think one of the people has sort of already thought of that, thinking about a 50-seater, which is good. If you've done the show before to 100 or 200 people and you sold out, that is amazing and wonderful, but it's not going to happen for 26 days in a row on the Fringe. So always aim as low as you can in audience capacity. Low as you can for budget, obviously, because you want to try and break even if you can. But think about your audience capacity, and then another way to narrow down which venue you might choose would be to think about the programming history of that venue. Where does your show fit within that venue? Is the venue famous for doing comedy and you're a Chekhov play? Well, that's not necessarily the best fit in the world. It might be in a great location, it might be a great price, and it might be a great size. But is your audience going to come to that venue? So thinking about programming history and programming preferences of the venue is really key. And then also thinking about location. Where in Edinburgh would you be performing? Would it be in the hubs that are dotted about the city, or would it be somewhere further afield? Different shows lend themselves to different audiences in different parts of the city. So thinking about who your work might appeal to is really key, and finding out what kinds of audiences show up at certain venues. Now, once you have those the audience capacity idea down, the location down, and the programming or what section of the program you might be in down, once you've answered those for yourself, we do have a venue search tool on our website, which I think might be on the screen or coming up soon.
Yeah, I'll just pop it in the chat now.
But that essentially is a list of venues that have told us they want to offer spaces to prospective fringe shows. And basically you can search by programming history, you can search by venue name if you've heard of one from a friend, or you can search by a range of audience capacity. So that's your number one stop. Now, just to quickly cover off things as well, because we do have a whole Fringe cast dedicated to finding a venue, which is coming up a little bit later next month. But essentially, once you've got a rough idea of what you're looking for, we usually suggest you contact about 10 venues or more. I always suggest you contact as many as you can possibly find that are suitable for your show. Some of them run on different models. We'll talk about that in a lot more detail in the next Fringe cast. But if you can find different kinds of venues that operate differently, offering something very similar, then at least you'll get a nice wide array of choice from which to make a really informed decision on which one you might go with. So that I'm going to stop it there because I think there'll be a lot more venue questions coming later on.
Yeah, totally. I think there's two things that we'll come back to some specific questions once we've got the end. There's two things that I wanted to sort of bring up about venues before we leave them, just because there was a lot of questions that come in beforehand, and I think they cover a lot of the questions that are coming in now. So one is people are asking, we've got like Find a Performer, they're asking about finding something that's mostly music or how long a run you should do. And I think that's one of the things that Katie, you talk about really well, about looking through like the previous Fringes programme, and kind of zeroing in on like, okay, where are the shows like mine, what are they doing?
Yeah, so what I always say to performers when they're looking to come to the Fringe and when they're planning their Fringe is to look through last year's programme and see what shows and other companies were in town last year that were doing something similar to you. So if it's a music show, go through the music section of the programme and see what venues these people went to, and see what kind of success that these people have had after the Fringe as well. So if you're looking to come here and say you want to tour after the Fringe, looking at somebody that's exactly a year ahead of you, finding out what they did, which venue they were in, what publications they were printed in, let's say if they got reviews, and where they've toured to after the Fringe, who they worked with as a producer, whether they have an agent. If you look at somebody that's exactly a year ahead of you rather than somebody that's 5 or 10 years ahead of you, it's much easier for you to achieve that kind of success in a year than it is at looking somebody who's 5 years ahead and has already, maybe a little bit unachievable for you. And
I've just popped in a link to last year's programme in the chat, and it's also worth flagging that until about January 2019, when we start preparing for the first shows of next year to go online, you can actually go to tickets.edfringe.com and see all the shows that were registered last year, look at what genre, what category, and then sort of get a feel for them. And a really handy part of that is that if they've included the information, you can get through their Twitter and Instagram and Facebook information, which is often a really handy way just to get in touch.
Yeah, because I think, the Fringe is one of those places where it appears that there's really heavy competition to get audiences, to get reviews, to get the right industry into the room. But actually, it's a really, really good for resource sharing and peer learning. And a lot of people are willing to share their experiences. So if
people love like paying it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there is a show that you saw last year or you noticed in the programme is really similar to you and you want to get in touch with them, I would say absolutely reach out to them on social media, or if you have any way of reaching out to them, if you find their website, because people, they know that it's a struggle and they know that it's a really hard month and you need to do as much as you can to succeed, and people are really willing to help and pay that forward, as you said, Alan.
So tying it back to that question where they were looking for that specific music show and not sure whether to do like 2 days or a full run, that kind of thing, if you find the show that you think is similar to yours and look what they did, because sometimes, like it's all very well us giving advice, but actually people who've been there and done that, and they were like, oh, in that space we did really well at weekends, but not so much during the week. That kind of thing. And the final thing before we move on is we've had a lot of questions both coming in now. I think it was Brendan that asked, and we had a lot beforehand, is about the free Fringe model and whether how that differs from a venue with paid tickets, and what are the sort of pros and cons and how that whole system works. Kevin, do you want to tackle all things free?
There are varying models on the Fringe under which venues operate. There are probably just as many different ways that venues operate as there are numbers of shows. So really it's about finding what works well for you. And certainly, I mean, there were over 800 shows last year registered with us that were free shows. So that obviously does work for a large number of people. So I would investigate those. They are listed through our venue search, but you can also go to their websites directly. I'll speak a little bit about them. There's one called PBH's Free Fringe. So you'll have to do a wee Google on that and go to their website. They've got lots of information, lots of detailed information on their website. Likewise, Laughing Horse Free Festival is another one. I would go to their website, explore what they're offering and what options are there. There's another model on the Fringe called Pay What You Want, which was pioneered by Heroes of the Fringe. So you could go to their website and have a look at how that works, but essentially it's kind of like the free model. It's slightly different in that tickets aren't necessarily free, but they can be. So the deal there basically is you can sell tickets for a certain amount, which will guarantee an audience member entry to your show, or they can show up and hope to get in if there is space available, and then perhaps give you something in a hat on the way out. So that's how that works. But what I would do is I would encourage you to explore all of the options. So as I was saying earlier, look at paid venues, look at venues that charge you just an upfront straight higher fee and don't have a box office split with you. Look at venues that are free, look at venues that work under the pay what you want model, look at all the different ones just to make sure that you're getting all of the options on your plate.
So it all comes back to check all your options, ask those questions, and then I hate to be a broken record already, but it goes back to that who, what, where, why. You answer those questions and they will help you make that decision. Like if you're really wanting lots of big industry people, lots of reviews, does that venue have that? Does the free model work for that? If it's like, actually I want to get more and more experience, I want to meet other companies, I want to grow, answer those questions is going to help.
And all these different models, sort of answering those questions, are just part of the Fringe. Just looking at a question from Jen that came in saying, so long as we're all registered with you and pay the registration fee, are we included in the brochure and the app? And that's, once you're registered, you're on edfringe.com, you're in the Fringe app, and if you register by the deadlines, which we'll come up to, you'll be in the brochure, irrespective of the model you use, because the way the Fringe works is anyone can bring a show, and we have never, ever turned a show away.
Yeah, there's no kind of tier system.
I think Jen's question leads really seamlessly into the next step.
Seamlessly into all things registration. I guess I should take this one because we planned that. I don't know why I'm acting as if that's somehow a surprise. So step 5, Jan to April, that is the registration process. Registration happens through our online portal called Ed Fringeware. It's joyous, I love it. It's where I spend most of my time. And registration opens in January, so that is when you can start registering your show. The only thing that we say that you need to have before that can take place is your venue contract. So your venue contract needs to be in place. And also registration is the only time in which you will pay money directly to the Fringe Society. Or the only time you have to. You could be doing advertising and things like that. But that's the one time that you will pay. That's when you pay your registration fee, which gets you in the printed programme if you met the deadline. It gets you on the app. It gets you on the website. It also gets you the services of the Fringe Society. Everything we've been talking about, all the ways we can help, we do that for registered performers. So as long as your show is in Fringeware by the deadlines, it's all registered, that means you have full access to us. You have access to Fringe Central, which Casey's going to talk about in a bit. So it's really the process where you give us all the information about your show, and we proof it and get it ready for the programme. There are deadlines that we'll talk about later, but really the main ones are the 10th of April is when that's the cut-off that Daniel talked about of you have to be registered by then in order to make it into the printed programme. And there's also, if we're talking about fees, you could save around £100 if your show is ready to go, signed off by the middle of March. We'll do the full deadlines, we'll come up later so you've got a chance to sort of spot them. But that's when what we could refer to as the discount deadline. It's basically a little prize for being early and being prepared and being organised. And that is around a saving of £100. The last thing I want to say about registration specifically is speak to your venue. Because different venues will handle the registration process in a different way. It's very much something that happens. It's a relationship between you and your venue because you both have to sign off on the show. And it's really important because some venues will have different ways of registering. So some will do it for you through our system. Some will have a slightly different system that they need you to fill in so as they can then liaise with us. So if I leave you with one thing with registration, it's talk to your venue about how that process works. For everything from how the fees are paid to whether they expect you to register yourself, that kind of thing.
I'll just add another couple of things to that. Just to clarify with registration as well, yes, you will likely be paying for that, but there's also a box office commission of 4% if you're selling tickets through the Fringe box office. And the minimum amount that you need to make available for sale is 25% of whatever the audience capacity is per performance. So just to have that clear, but also registration isn't a prerequisite. There are lots of shows that happen in August in Edinburgh that are not registered with us, and of course that's totally fine, but it does exclude you from being able to sell tickets through our box office on the app or have a listing on our website whether you're selling tickets or not. You can, if you're a free show, having a listing, a live URL that you can point to is really handy. And of course all the services and pastoral care that we provide throughout the year. So just wanted to make that.
Yeah, that's it's escaping my registration bubble now. When I'm there and I'm like, everyone is registered. So step 6, February to March, which is happening concurrently while you're registering, you may have noticed, and that's really thinking about what is your Fringe marketing campaign. So once you've got your venue sorted, you're registered, you're starting to get all the nuts and bolts into place, you really need to start thinking about what is my show, what is that hook, what is unique about it, what's the story I'm telling, why am I here. And that doesn't mean you should be contacting like the media at this time. I would definitely hold off till like April's the sort of best sort of time to start with that. But really sort of putting in place that, hang on, what is my show? Can I say it in a quick 30 seconds? Like that term elevator pitch, which I tend not to like, but it sounds really corporate, but it's what it is. You need to be able to sell your show, and I can't overestimate enough how much thinking about that and starting to put the sort of business brain on at the same time as the creative one will help you, not just when talking to the press and marketing your show. It'll help you when you're flyering, it'll help you talking to industry down the line. It's going to help you over and over again, which leads me nicely to you, Katie.
How exciting.
I'm going to give you throw point 70.
So yeah, just to kind of follow on from Alan's thinking about your marketing campaign, we can certainly help you with all of the kind of points involved in actually starting and maintaining your marketing campaign. So just a few things to think about at this, well, not at this point, but to think about once you've set up your venue and you've started to register your show and you've thought about what your marketing campaign will be. But think about who you're targeting. This again comes back to those who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who are you targeting? What platforms are they using? Are they on social media? Do they use traditional print? If they're on social media, have you run a social media campaign before? Do you know the ins and outs of that? You know, are you going to factor social media marketing and advertising into your budget, Kevin? Do you need a publicist? And if so, do you know, again, looking at Fringe shows from last year, who do they work with? We can help you find a publicist. We have a publicist list, but again, that's not something that that you should be thinking at just now, but something that maybe you factor into your budget if you have the money for that. Have you ever written a press release? And how do you contact the press? Again, these are all services that we can help you think about. So you should also be thinking about your professional development at that point. We can help you with networking, identifying goals for the development of your career and show, whether you want to tour afterwards, whether you want to find an agent, whether you want to find a producer, and we can provide you with lists of those people who are coming to the Fringe. The Fringe is a marketplace. It's a place where a lot of venues come to find the right work to program in their venues. It's where a lot of agents come to find new talent, and it's where a lot of producers might come to pick up a show to develop beyond the Fringe.
To give you just a couple of emails that would be really useful to have in mind coming down the line. One of them is mediaadvice@edfringe.com. Daniel's just putting that in the comment section now. That address can be like any question you have around media, marketing. We have a publicist list if you're wanting at the sort of end of this year, start next year to really start honing in on someone. We can help you with that. And there's also artist advice at edfringe.com, which takes to Katie's team.
Yeah, so these are both really great email addresses if you have very specific questions about more closer to the lead up of the Fringe. Right now, it's kind of a little bit looser, and you'd be contacting participants at edfringe.com. But these two email addresses are useful for a little bit further down the line.
It's more of if you're looking at February to March, June to August timeline, those are email addresses to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, definitely.
And just coming back to a point I believe Alan made, that it may seem really early to be talking about February and March about your marketing and thinking about your development, but August is a very busy, crazy time, and every hour of work you put in that early stage pays off infinitely.
I'm just going to put up step 8 because we're talking about it now.
So every, as Daniel said, every hour that you put in to step 1 to 7 makes your time for step 8 in August at the Fringe so much more manageable. And once you've put in the groundwork and the preparation in the lead up to August, you will get so much more enjoyment and fulfillment out of the Fringe. A lot of people who maybe aren't aware of the services we offer, or just haven't gotten round to going through these steps, kind of come to it in August as a very fresh perspective without realising that they could have done so much of this, and it can be quite overwhelming once you get to the Fringe. But we're here still in August to help. We moved to Fringe Central, which is our participants hub, so a lot of our teams are based there. So the media team, the artist advice team, and the participant development team, our Fringe Central team, and these are all your participant facing teams that are kind of there and available for you when you're in town if you have any questions that we can help you with. So do visit Fringe Central. It's your home away from home during the Fringe. It's a hub where you can spend time. There's couches and beanbags that you can relax in between your shows. You can get your printing done. If you have any admin or any kind of work that you want to do in between shows, there's Wi-Fi, there's computer access.
And there's each other as well. Seeing now, even we can see the live chat going as we go, and see, you can already see that people are answering each other's questions. It's that kind of thing of it's a great place, Fringe Central, to engage other artists and other people who are going through the exact same thing as you. Yeah,
and you know what? I think starting in your venue with making friends and networks between other contacts that are kind of in the same boat as you, but then branching out into Fringe Central and having that wider atmosphere to engage within. So within Fringe Central, we also have, as I said, our teams are there, so you can book in for one-to-one sessions or just pop in to see us. We also have the Fringe Central Events program. So this is a really, really useful program containing all of our development and networking events that are completely free for any of the artists that are involved in Fringe shows. This could be anything from drawing up contracts to networking with people doing similar shows to you. There's workshops, lectures, seminars, seminars, one-to-one sessions, and it's a really, really useful place, not only to develop your career and your kind of creativity, but also to meet other people that are in the same boat as you. I think the most important thing that you can take away from the Fringe is the networks and the peers that you've engaged with during your time here. A lot of those people will be on the same level as you experience-wise, and it's really, really good to have those people around you to bounce ideas off and to collaborate with in the future.
And even practically, like, you can exit fly at each other's shows, share that audience. Like, one thing that sometimes people are surprised by, I think you mentioned it earlier, Katie, is like you'd think because there's so many shows that it's a competitive kind of market, but
and
really
it can be occasionally. You know,
but I'd say that there's also that thing of the audience is big, and actually a show that's got similar themes to you or has a similar like feel to it and attracts a similar audience, actually they should be your peer that you work with rather than against.
Yeah, because you can help promote each other's shows. The last thing I want to say about your time in August, and probably the most important actually, because you're here now and you've done these steps and you're planning from day one, when you're here in August, enjoy your time here. Go and see shows, make friends, explore the city, and more importantly than anything, take care of yourself. Yeah. It's a really, really long month, and make sure to eat well, to sleep well, and to pace yourself. By all means, have fun and go out at night, because that's where you're going to be meeting people. You meet people in bars, at shows, in different areas, but do take care of yourself and, make sure that you're taking care of your mental health first and foremost.
Yeah, I think as a final, we're going to go on now to a different sort of stage, but I would say a final thing that we normally bring up at this kind of session is escape the bubble in August. Take that, it can feel like an all-encompassing kind of, August I am spent in Edinburgh doing this, but actually, even if that's going to walk up Arthur's Seat, which I personally would not do. I mean, it's a lovely view, but I don't like walking. But even like people go to Glasgow for the day, people head to North Berwick just to get a bit of quiet. Like, know ahead of time that actually escaping that bubble is part of having a successful Fringe. Absolutely. To keep yourself on the right path. Now the next thing we're going to talk about, I'm bringing up here kind of like a checkerboard game show of different things that will actually cover a lot of the questions that you've been asking. These are, if we talk about a lot of the questions that have come before, these are the ones that sometimes people don't think of in advance. So I think the best thing to do, Daniel's I'm going to go back.
I was just going to suggest that we've had quite a few questions come in, and we can touch on some of these topics that people haven't thought about. There's 3 or 4 that I thought we could cover at this stage, because some do relate to questions such as the topic of international companies and performers. We had a question from Rafe about international performers. What are the legal issues that come in when coming from, say, America when performing at the Fringe?
Yep, there are many different ways, and essentially we have one section on our website dedicated specifically to international performers or shows coming from outside of the UK. There are different ways of entering the UK to perform at the Fringe, but specifically for the Fringe, we're on the Home Office's, the UK Home Office's list of permit-free festivals. And what that means is you don't need to apply for a work permit in order to come to the UK to perform at the Fringe only. If you're doing a little bit of work on either side, that's a different visa. That's something we can advise you on, or at least point you in the right direction on. We aren't international immigration lawyers, so our knowledge and advice is limited. But we do know what to... essentially, the Home Office will categorise an individual depending on what country they're coming from and for how long they're staying. And within that, we have guidance on our website, which is a little toolkit on how to apply for a visa and whether you need one at all. So there's lots of information on our website for that. It's all very specific. If you're coming from America, essentially, that's part of being on the permit-free festival list. You don't need to apply for a visa before you leave the States. You do need to get a welcome letter from us and have information with you to prove that you can support yourself while you're in the UK and that you have an intention of leaving the UK at the end of the Fringe. So there's, that's information that we can provide you on specifically, but it's all very unique to where you're coming from individually. I might also just quickly touch on Brexit because it might be on people's minds, but essentially after
the B word already.
After the 29th of March 2019, who knows where we might be, but essentially no laws will magically change overnight. In this case specifically, the current law will stay in place. So if you are coming from the European Union or the EEA, the European Economic Area, you will be able to enter the UK in just the same way as you always have until December 2020. So that's quite some time. So if you're coming from anywhere in Europe, and I think there's no one in there. If you are coming from Europe, don't worry about that. It's okay for now. But we're working on it, and we'll obviously give you more information as and when it comes our way.
So I think the next one, I can see we've got a question from both Brendan and Beth about accommodation. One, like, Beth's being, is it hard to find? And Brendan's being like, how do we go about organising that?
Yep, there are many ways. In our research, we found out that many people end up organising accommodation through themselves or through other companies that are coming from where they're coming from, so sharing that burden. So that's something you could do a little bit of research on to find out if there's anybody else in your area who's coming to Edinburgh, and you could share the accommodation. But we do have an accommodation page, which I think will be going up just shortly. Daniel's popping that in there now. Within that, we also have a services directory that provides accommodation from actual accommodation providers. So these are people whose business it is to provide housing, and they can be large letting agents, but they can be smaller ones. But these are basically businesses that profit from this. We also have an accommodation register that we administer. We don't vet properties. It's not quite as in-depth as that, but essentially it's a list of local landlords with a room or a full flat or sometimes even a whole house. And they're willing to let that specifically to fringe performers. We don't vet them. Again, it's very much a self-regulating system. If we get complaints, obviously we investigate those, but essentially the only thing that we do ask of those listing with us on our accommodation register is that they keep the cost low and they keep it between a certain amount. And that's available from April, which is a little late, I know, I acknowledge that, but that's when locals start to think about August and start thinking about whether they'll be available to let the properties that they own at that time. Some people start thinking about accommodation very, very early on, and some people book that really early on. And I mean, there isn't really a simple answer for accommodation. It is a struggle and it's a barrier for lots of people. And we acknowledge that, and we're working on all sorts of solutions for it. Other options that we have as well are Queen Margaret University and a few other student halls and university halls of residence that are available maybe slightly outside of the city centre. And those are sometimes really, really useful for large groups because you can all stay in the same place together. They're relatively secure and safe. But in booking any accommodation, my number one bit of advice, or a few pieces of advice, would be to try to start looking as early as you can so you see what's available, and then continue looking. Don't jump at the first one, and don't do any bank transfers. Don't do anything dodgy like that. Please just stick with credit cards and stick with reputable payment methods. And that would be my at this point in time, total on accommodation.
Yeah.
Unless anyone else.
Daniel?
We've had a question coming from Marie, which has sparked a little bit of discussion in the live chat, which is, are most performers in their 20s or early 30s? Katie, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely not. No, I think there are a lot of younger performers, just because the Fringe can be seen as a development platform, and a lot of people in their early career come here to meet people and to set up those networks. But actually, I find that a lot of performers are older than that, so many. And one of the most active performers that was engaging with our services last year was a woman in her 70s, and she was probably the most engaged and active of the performers that came to see me. Yeah. So it really varies across the board.
We literally had people in their 80s,
yeah.
like Lynn Miller, like a
yes,
burlesque artist, like who's been at the Fringe a lot of times, like. We totally run the gamut in terms of age.
It's the world's largest arts festival, more than 3,500 shows. Everyone from almost how many countries? I can't remember. Nearly 50 countries. is represented.
Yeah.
So everyone's here.
And I'd say that's the same with audience as well.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like your audience can completely change from like, oh, my audience today is like a youth theatre from America that have all come to see the show versus like, oh, this is a elderly group.
Yeah.
We've had quite a lot of questions come in with specifics about venues, and it's worth reiterating Kevin's point that we do have a dedicated session to budgeting, his favourite topic, and finding a venue. So we'll explore them in more depth, but we can after, we have about 7 minutes left, but we will try and pick those up at the end, if that's okay. But we thought we'll just cover some of the topics on screen now that you may not have thought about. Have any of those? I want to pick one of those up for 5 points from the board.
Somebody asked in the comments, I think, about working with children, and Kevin, you have a
Yeah,
website.
definitely.
Yes, something that we didn't know.
Yes.
I don't have a website. But I do.
No?
It's information.
Information.
It's information that's on our website. But if you are going to be working with children or animals and you are not based in Edinburgh, it's a fairly simple way to go about it. You do need to notify your local authority if you're bringing a child with you, and it's where the child is permanently resident. If you let that local authority know, that local authority will contact City of Edinburgh Council, and thereby you will have a license to have that child or to mind that child if you're the carer of the child or not, if they're performing in a show. Likewise with animals, if you are using animals in a show, you simply need to allow the City of Edinburgh Council some time to know about that, but also the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So it's a fairly simple one, but a slightly unknown one. But I hope that helps answer that person's question they spoke about earlier.
Yeah, I want to pick up the glamorous topic of public liability insurance, because that's something when I did my first Fringe I was not aware of and had not factored in. But actually, it's a very simple process, which sounded really overwhelming and something I didn't understand. But basically, your venue that you're performing in, they will have their own public liability insurance that covers people in the venue. But at that point, when the house is given over to your show, you are then responsible for that audience in that space, and public liability insurance basically covers you for that. And it's something we, again, in the Take Part section of our website, we have information on that and some recommendations of places you can go.
I'm going to be the awful person looking at the clock that we have just under 5 minutes left. So I'd say for all these topics on screen, do come back to this stream. Look on our guides to putting on a show at the Fringe, which I'll pop in the comments, which covers all these topics. But if none of these are covered or you can't find it, just email us on participants@fringe.com. But do you want to jump ahead to the last steps, and then we'll at the very end cover these venue questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff about tech and stuff coming in, so maybe
absolutely.
that's what we cover.
And do you know what? It's just, if any of those things are on the screen, even if they've just made you go, oh, I need to think about that down the line, then that's exactly what it's there for. So our last slide is just talking you through some key dates for the diary, really. So Monday the 7th of January, big old day, that's when we open registration. The 13th of March is the date I was talking about that's the discounted deadline, in order to save you like that £100. And then the 10th of April is the final day for being able to get in the printed programme. And then we have the Friday that I always miss, the last day. Friday the 2nd of August is the first official day of the Fringe. Those two empty boxes are not empty boxes, they're actually meant to be a smiley face emoji, because it's a happy occurrence. And then Monday the 26th of August, that is the last official day.
Sad day.
It makes me sad that the sad face emoji works and the happy one.
It's like you've got a very negative computer. So we actually had a question come in about when we're doing our sessions on venues. I feel like we may have a slide for that, Alan. Is that okay? Or have I jumped?
You've jumped slightly, but that's fine. I can come back to the Tales How to Engage. This one with that charming picture of us. Our next session is finding a venue and planning your budget. And that's those dates there. That's Thursday the 13th of December, where we do it at 7 o'clock GMT, and then we do it Friday the 14th of December, 10 a.m.
Wonderful.
And I'll share a link to those. And also you can meet us in person if you're in London, Edinburgh or New York over the next 2-3 months.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are going to be in New York. I think that's somebody else, which is sad.
You'd get Kevin in London though, and I'm in Edinburgh.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
So should we'll jump back to how to there's other ways to contact us in addition to the email?
It's a good slide to leave you on as well of ways of engaging with us, contacting us. You can see this there. If you've got any questions that you don't think we've covered, participants at fringe.com is definitely a really good place to start. You can see our Facebook or our Twitter there. And then that website at the bottom, edfringe.com/take part. That is where you can find a whole cacophony of information about everything we've discussed.
So that's the main info for this session. So I guess we move on to Fringecast Extra and cover these quick venue questions as quickly as
someone read them out to me. I'm
Sure.
sorry, I can't see
So there's been a lot of questions that have come in relating to tech, such as do the venues provide tech? Well, I need to bring my own tech person. Do you provide PAs, mics, lights, etc. to rent them?
Yes and no. So some venues, it all depends because, as I said, there are many different kinds of venues. Some will be simply an empty garage. And, for the right kind of show that wants that atmosphere, that doesn't want a traditional performing space, that's perfect. But that wouldn't be right necessarily for you if you have a highly technical show. Our Fringe Guide to Choosing a Venue, the online venue search tool, in there, once you've narrowed down the things I spoke about earlier, audience capacity, all of that, you can then look at those specific venues and they will provide you with the information about what kind of tech support they offer and what you might need. But most venues on the Fringe will have a very simple tech support in place, a basic one that would support most shows for what they need to do in the Fringe. Most Fringe shows aren't necessarily too technically complicated either, simply because you have to get in and get out of your venue sometimes within 5 minutes. So if you have a very complicated setup and takedown, it may not necessarily work. So you can look at our individual venue search tool to see which venues are offering what it is that you need. Or again, just get in touch with us if you're looking for something like you need a sprung floor or you need a specific kind of projector. We can help narrow that down for you.
This ties into actually a question from Valentina Kevin, who is asking, they've got a vertical dance show and their question is would there be a wall, indoor or outdoor, that could host it? So something, if you've got something that specific,
A wall.
a wall is the if you've got a specific requirement like that, so like flying or piano.
Well, there's lots of venues in Edinburgh that can support aerial work. There's not a ton of them, but certainly quite a few, and we could give you that information. You could also find it on our website. But really, just get in touch with us. I know we keep saying that, but and I know you've asked us a question. I don't have the time to go through the 10, 15 different venues that could support you with that. But if you just drop us a line, I can easily let you know which ones they could be. But again, you spoke about being outside as well. That's certainly an option. It would probably involve a lot more work on your part because you would have to find and source and get permission for using that space, and also have a license in place to perform there. Whereas if you just applied to an existing venue that already had the infrastructure and support for you in place, it would be a little bit easier. But we can go through that individually if you like.
Yeah, and a lot of these questions seem to be, again, I'm going to go a little bit broken record, about that communication with your venue. Make sure you're asking these questions, because it could be the simple thing of, I've got that answered. It's a no, actually our show doesn't fit. We're just not a good fit, and the venues want shows that are a good fit for them too. So it's about getting that relationship right and making sure you ask those questions. You don't want to not ask that question, get down the line, and suddenly it's July and you're like, oh, hang on, I need a grand piano. Why is there not one there?
Yeah.
There was a question from Stuart about different sort of shows clustering together. I think your point, Kevin, was more that certain venues specialise in certain categories and genres, but is there more about the kind of geographical spread within the city?
No, I wouldn't actually say there is. There's certainly hubs where you might find more comedy than you would find otherwise, but that's, I think, just simply because comedy makes about 23% of the program's specific section of the program, and that is the largest part of the Fringe program. So I think you might find that just naturally, but sometimes there are certain venues that are specifically dedicated to dance. There are venues specifically dedicated to acoustic music or jazz. There's all kinds. Some specialize in international performers. They have international showcases. So it sort of runs the gamut. So it's about doing a little bit of research to find out where those venues are. But it's also about being self-aware. And so if you know exactly who you are and what shows are like yours, then that's a very good basis to start some research on figuring out which venues might be able to support you in that way. If you're looking for that kind of camaraderie or involvement with other shows. It does happen. It happens an awful lot on the Free Fringe as well. A lot of the various Free Fringe operators and venues and models cluster shows in certain ways that happen at certain places, and that certainly lends itself to a lot of camaraderie. If I'm getting the sense from that question is you're looking for almost like a support network of other shows similar to yours, then that does happen on the Free Fringe quite a lot.
Yeah, I think that's us almost there with questions. I can see one more, I think, from Layla.
Yeah.
And I think we can answer that. And it's talking about getting sort of 5 to 10 minute slots or being part of compilation shows. Katie, do you want to...
Yeah, so there are a lot of compilation and variety shows in Edinburgh during the Fringe, but because it's such a kind of instantaneous atmosphere, a lot of them are programmed on the day or the day before. So because they're on every single day, you know, programming them so far in advance, when you might only hear of one performer the day before, it doesn't really happen. So I'm not sure if now is the right time to start filling those slots. A lot of them will fill them at a later time. We also have a performer showcase opportunities listing on the website, which again, it's not put up until after the main program launches, so in June. So it is that kind of thing of once the programs or once the venues have programmed all of their main slots, that's when a lot of them start to add variety slots that then they start to look for acts for. But I think Kevin maybe has a little more to say, or have I covered it?
No, you've covered it perfectly. As always. But essentially, yeah, as Katie was saying, those are very much last minute things, and there isn't doing the Fringe, there isn't a guidebook that says if you do all these things it'll be perfect. Essentially, if you're looking for that kind of thing, you need to hang out in the areas where those shows are happening and where those people who are programming those are happening. And I may know a little bit of that, Katie might know a little bit of that, people you meet on the street might know a little bit of that. So it really is as simple or as complicated, if you want to put it that way, as being in the right place at the right time. But we do have a listing that we actively seek out shows and venues that are looking to put together compilation shows and put them on that list. So that will be available in June, as Katie says.
That's all the questions I think we've got on the live feed for today.
Yeah, great. So hopefully this has been helpful for everyone. I guess now all that's left for me to say really is thank you for joining us today. We've left on screen oh no, we've not. Daniel's cut to us so we can actually say bye.
Goodbye. There you go.
There we go. Now back to that. So again, those forms of communication we've left on the screen. Get in touch if there's anything that has piqued your interest or you're not sure about, or if you have any other questions, please do just get in touch. That participants@edfringe.com. And yeah, thank you for joining us from wherever in the world you've come from.
Join us again on the 13th and 14th December. We've got a slide for that, for finding a venue and planning your budget. Our favourite topic.
So if you're in London, 1st of December, 12 o'clock, we're there. You can find out more information on our website. Or if you're meeting us online again, Thursday the 13th of December, Friday the 14th of December, we'll be here talking venues and Kevin's favourite thing, budgets.
Yay!
Yay! Thanks everyone, thanks for joining.
Thank you,
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye.